everybody. I guess I need to turn on the microphones. Welcome to this edition of Blast from the Bunker. My name is Jason Hunt. I'm the editor here at Sci-Fi For Me. And to my far right...
I am R.J. Carter, Senior Managing Editor here at CriticalBlast.com, Chief Envelope Licker for Critical Blast Logistics, myopic proofreader for Critical Blast Publishing, and yes, I do help you with your crowdfunding data with my 35 years of database design experience through Critical Blast Consulting.
And caught in the middle, David Luxton is our guest tonight. David Luxton PhD. He is a clinical psychologist. He is an author of various different fiction and nonfiction works, and is also a musician. He's actually composed music for my movies. So David is here tonight to talk about kind of an interesting juxtaposition of a lot of different things that have come together all at once. And we're talking about unidentified flying objects, or whatever it is that they're calling them now. Unidentified aerial phenomenon. Okay, yeah. So David, welcome to the program. How are you, sir?
Hey, it's great to be with you again, Jason, and it's great to meet you, RJ.
Same here.
Oh, hang on. I got to turn that off. Hang on. All right.
He got so excited. He's got to play the music again. We want to start this over.
See, well, it's been a while since I've engineered this show, and I get rusty. Now, David was on last week. We were talking about artificial intelligence and some of the new concerns that people have with that. He's got a book about that. But tonight we're going to talk about UFOs. You've got a book that kind of delves into the psychology of this whole phenomenon of alien visitors and UFOs and unexplained things. It's called The Goldilocks Zone. Why don't we start a little bit, tell people about that book there, and then we'll get into the UFOs tonight.
Yeah, so anyways, you can't really see it there, but yeah, The Goldilocks Zone, it's a novel, so obviously it's fiction, but what I did is in doing the research for it is I drew from all the real stuff from the UFO lore and its history and a lot of the current events up until I published it in 2021. I started the thing, before the pandemic started. And really what the book is about, it's about what's now become fairly mainstream, this idea of mass formation psychosis and how propaganda and other information can create this sort of mass beliefs about things that may or may not be true. And really the novel is about this journey of the protagonist, who is a young journalist who's kind of a modern, hipster, millennial type, who is kind of navigating his own perceptions of reality and what's the information that's presented towards, around him and really forced onto him too, and gets involved with this story, doing a coverage of this UFO cult in Montana, and gets really drawn in with a very charismatic leader of that group. And let's just say eventually, I don't want to give too much away, but he has an experience. He's a very skeptical person, but has an experience later in the book where it's like once you've experienced something so personal that and you've seen it with your own eyes and felt it with your own body, then it's got to be real, right?
Right.
But or is it? And so he goes through this kind of journey. And as I said, I wrote this before the pandemic had started, and it just sort of aligns in with a lot of just some of the stuff around mass beliefs about things and propaganda and information, social media, what's going on behind the scenes, and just one's understanding of reality.
Assuming, of course, that reality is real and it's not a simulation, which is, another popular theory, but another show, right, Jason?
Yeah. Well, and you see, it's one of those things though, because this idea of UFOs and visitors from another place or all that kind of stuff, that's been with us for a very long time. And when David mentions mass formation psychosis, this is something that's kind of a new item in the lexicon of people talking about this stuff. And it's not just with UFOs. We get mass formation psychosis with a lot of different things now. You know, and people have sat there and said, well, that's just a fancy way of saying conspiracy theory. You know, because everybody starts to think about all of these different things that could be going on in the background and behind the scenes. What do we not know about? And you know, you got QAnon on one side, you got Blue Anon on the other side, and you got a bunch of people in the middle who are just wondering what's going on.
Yeah.
When
Well,
this kind of thing happens, is there an inciting incident? Because in this latest round of stuff, we had the Chinese spy balloon get caught over Montana, and all of a sudden everybody's talking about UFOs, and now we're shooting down UFOs, and we got this thing over here, it's a UFO, and this over here is a UFO, and you know, turns out at least one of them was not. It was a balloon that was put together by a ham radio club. We shot down. Yay us, I guess. I mean, where does this kind of thing start when it starts becoming this thing that everybody's talking about? How does that get started?
Well, let's just step back a bit about this specific topic. So obviously the whole UFO stuff has quite a rich history, as we all know, you know, Roswell and Paperclip
Ezekiel.
and Ezekiel, yeah, biblical stuff even, right?
Yeah.
But more so in the past century and kind of post nuclear, humankind discovers nuclear weapons, and all of a sudden we're seeing flying saucers and alien abductions and things, right?
Yeah.
Kenneth Arnold here in Washington State and so forth. But there were a couple of really major events that happened in the last number of years. And one was the publication in the New York Times of the UAP stuff that was seen by naval aviators going back to 2004, and then later, I think 2014 as well. And that was really kind of getting it out in the forefront. Hey, the Navy is acknowledging, the U.S. government's acknowledging that they're identifying these things, or they're observing things that they're not identified, that they're calling UAPs. And that name has changed, by the way. It's still UAP, but instead of unidentified aerial phenomena, it's now, I think it's unidentified anomalous phenomena. And the reason for that is because that these things are transmedium. They're being observed going into water or coming out of water. And okay. I'd like to talk about that here in a little bit too. There's some interesting developments in that area. But the other major thing that happened was in June of 2021, there was a pretty important report released to the DoD from various agencies were involved in it, and it was given to Congress. And then there's been some hearings since then. And it talks about the observation. I think it's 144 events, and about more than half of those, about 80 something of them, actually had more than one recording or data source. So it's not just like a visual. There was something else recording it: camera, infrared, something, radar, so forth. Which to me, this is the first time, and certainly I think ever, that certainly in the United States, that the government has come out and just said, yeah, we're observing something, we don't know what it is, and it's flying in our skies. It's classic UFO stuff from, I remember from my childhood and watching all those movies and things. And yeah, okay, there's definitely something going on here. And then the other thing that's significant that's related to these two things is that they have now made it, they've taken away some of the stigma for pilots, both military and commercial, to report this stuff. So when they see it, and we've turns out they've been seeing stuff like this forever, seeing objects that they cannot identify. They're just not traditional aircraft. They're not satellites. They're not weather phenomena. They're seeing stuff, and they've made it a little bit easier for pilots now to report on stuff, which is quite interesting. And I'm a data scientist. I have a background in just analyzing data, and very interested in, so what does the data show about all this? And there's been a number of smaller studies that have looked at the data, like where these things are being observed. You probably have heard of this. Like there's some, even across the United States, there's some zones that they seem to occur more often in, the sightings. Right. But with this more recent data that the military and also commercial pilots are reporting, it's kind of interesting. And there's some patterns that are interesting. And the other thing that's really important here too is, like with everything, there's always everything kind of coming together, and allowing for new ways of looking at things. But it's just the advancement of technology. And even with radar systems and so forth, as this has been in the news recently, that maybe the military is observing stuff more now than they had been before, and that's why a number of these aviators and pilots have reported this stuff. I have some other hypotheses about that too, which I'm sure we're going to get into.
You talk about analyzing the data, and I'm kind of reminded. I did a show on my own about I want to say about a year ago, and I can't recall the author's name. I'd have to look it up. But she is another UFO researcher, and what she and her wife had done was put together a compendium of not just sightings, like oh, this is what happened, but just I saw it. It was this kind, and I was here, and it's nothing but numbers and sums of locations and what type of craft and when it was. And I said, do you have that like in a database where it can be like animated over a globe to see, hey, are these things moving? Is there a migration pattern? She's like, no, but that'd be a really good idea.
Yeah, you could find that now. People have done those studies, and that there are certain, as I said, certain regions of the United States where they seem to be more common, where there's more sightings. As I said, though, I'm more interested in this data, like these 144 now plus UAP sightings that the military is tracking, because these are being observed by pilots and military personnel, and also with other data sources, so with radar or other sensors, so not just someone's self-report. Because let's just face it, MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, has been gathering a database for decades, and so there's a huge database of sightings. You can actually just Google it. You can find it online, where they have like spreadsheets where you can find in what year and what location where there's sightings. But it's just loaded with noise, right? It's someone had too much whiskey one night, and then they see a bright light, and then they're calling MUFON the next morning. Yeah.
Well, it's like back in what 1938 when Orson Welles did the War of the Worlds radio cast. You had people going outside, taking their shotguns and blasting away at the water towers because they look like the Martian tripods, and there they are, and they're coming for us. So people have a tendency to panic in low information situations, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. But this brings up an interesting thing that I've observed as a psychologist, that it kind of intrigues me, that even with this 2017 New York Times report, with the DoD report, and more recent things, that why isn't there more? It's not that I'm expecting hysteria, like people taking their shotguns out and shooting everything that's flying over, but it seems like there ought to be more public interest in this. I've been surprised by that, and I am biased myself because, well, one, I wanted to do a book on it, and so I have an innate interest in this topic because, one, I find it very interesting, and I'm an Air Force veteran. I've even lived in a UFO hotspot, and where there's a lot of kind of lore about it in New Hampshire, and I've just had an interest in this topic for a long time. But now with these reports out, it's like we're acknowledging it.
Yeah.
However, with this most recent, these balloons, and I don't believe that the Biden administration has admitted that all four of the things that have been shot down are balloons. I think that they may have said that, but they haven't necessarily identified or retrieved them all, right?
Okay, so skeptic that I am, my first thought is, okay, what else could they be? Let's eliminate for a moment the possibility that they could be extraterrestrial in origin. Let's just stick to planet Earth for now. What could they be, given how far back the history of sightings goes? And could it be the same thing, or could we just be seeing different things and people mistaking them for whatever it is that they think they saw?
Yeah, you mean like these most recent four events? So one is obviously
any of them historically, but yeah, we can start with the first four. These most recent ones.
Yeah. So, one is confirmed to be a balloon from China. One, I believe, is a balloon from a club, an amateur radio club, that they probably spent $1.5 million on shooting it down. The other two, that's what I'm saying. I'm wondering if they've actually have identified them. And I recall watching those briefings in the last week or two, that the shapes of these were different. They weren't like a standard round balloon. they didn't even look like a blimp. They looked something. I think one of them was hexagonal or something like that. Which is, to me, that's odd. But you can make a balloon that has a shape like that.
Right.
Obviously, one of those giant Macy Day Parade, balloons gets loose and flies off. I mean, we got a giant head flying across the country, right? Something like that could happen. The other thing I thought was interesting, I was thinking about this today, is that one of the naval aviators, and I believe this is the one that was off of on the East Coast, they had observed an object, and of course they're flying by pretty fast, and they said it was I believe it was a cube inside of a sphere. So like the sphere was kind of transparent, or at least somewhat transparent, and there was some kind of shape within it. I believe it was some kind of cube. So that sounds really, really bizarre. Like, what could that be? Well, who's to say you can't design a balloon that has a structure on the inside like that and it's observable? Now, the other weird thing, though, is the speed of the object. I believe it was moving, and balloons cannot go any faster than the jet stream, right, or the wind.
Right. And
unless
you can't steer them.
Yeah, I think you can somewhat steer this. Supposedly, that's what our government was saying about this Chinese balloon. It had some way of, they were saying this. And I don't know if it was, I actually didn't look into it. What was the form of propulsion? Did it have little propellers on the thing? Was it doing some kind of thing by reflecting heat or something? I don't know. I'm assuming it was a helium-filled balloon. Yeah. So I think you can steer them. Certainly dirigibles you can steer.
Yeah. Traditionally, it's always been, if you want to change direction, go higher or lower where the wind's blowing.
Right, where the wind is blowing, exactly. But back to your question, Jason, I think that people are, I don't know. Like, this has happened throughout history, right, with the flying saucers. So once Kenneth Arnold says he saw these objects that looked like skipping saucers, now everyone is seeing dish-shaped things, right? I think from some of those movies from maybe the 80s, where they see a certain object, or the Betty and Barney Hill thing that happened in New Hampshire, where they were abducted driving back from the White Mountains, allegedly abducted, and there was a certain type of thing that they saw with windows, right? And so then you got everyone else seeing similar types of things. The famous case of, and I don't want to discredit him by any means, but the Fire in the Sky, his name is slipping my mind at the moment, but they made the movie. It happened in the 70s. And I understand, like, that week or that night before, there was a on TV movie about a UFO abduction. And so people maybe they drop a little LSD, and they've watched a movie, now they're seeing something.
You're talking about Travis Walton? Travis
Walton, yeah. And all due respect to him, I've never met him, but I'm not saying he's not being truthful, but there's just those kind of coincidences, where people, they experience something on TV, or they see something, and then it starts getting into their mind consciously and subconsciously, and then they start seeing it.
We have such a rapid news cycle combined with such a plethora of crazy that's been going on for the past several years that, honestly, I think that's why, Pentagon says we have UFOs. Everyone's like, "Wow, we've got them. There they are. They've admitted it." And then the next week, there's nothing. It's literally, we could have a zombie apocalypse tomorrow, and next month say, "Hey, remember when we were shooting heads off all them zombies? Yeah, that was fun."
At the same time, though, you talk about the media coverage. There's this fluster, and here UFO, and then dead silence. And at this point now, a lot of us out here in normal world, and David, you can sympathize with this. You and I have talked about this a little bit. You've got a lot of people that are looking at this, not really skeptical of the UFO idea, the concept of the UFO, skeptical, though, of the media and the government. And, okay, you're selling me a line. What are you distracting me from? And that's the assumption that people, well, now we're talking about UFOs. What are we not talking about? Is from a psychological standpoint, I'm trying to think of the best way to ask this without getting really deep in the weeds. Is there some angle psychologically where the government, an organization, it doesn't even have to be the government, but some kind of an organization benefits from the assumption and the dialogue and the chatter about UFOs, whether they're real or not?
Yeah, well, I think, there's certainly people have been talking about, distraction, right? So you've got these other things going on. If you look at just the events in the last, I don't know, a couple of years, but really just the last like 2 months, like these big high profile things in the United States. So you've got, the discovery of classified documents, you've got the UFO thing, the UAP thing, you've got the war in Ukraine, you've got other controversies and things, and the revelations about big pharma, all this kind of stuff that's sort of happening, the Twitter files, all that. And it's like right after another, right? There's one after another. Some have thought, well, is some of this, the attention on the balloons thing is just a distraction? Well, I don't know. I think it really happened. People saw it, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
So
Well,
it really happened.
and the Chinese balloon in particular, it was I think it was first a TV station in Montana started talking about it.
That's correct.
And then once local media had it, then social media had it, and then the federal government had to acknowledge it at that point. And of course, we're all sitting there going, "Why are you letting it fly over? Why are you letting it fly over
I'd let it
military
finish
stations?
spying before they could
Why
shoot
are
it
you
down."
letting it go? Why don't you shoot it down? That kind of thing. But that's a completely different aspect of this conversation where, yes, we acknowledge that it exists, and that one has very terrestrial origins in it. It's pretty straightforward. It's a spy balloon, shoot it down. Whereas you have these others, like you said, the ones that are not identified, and even going back as far as Roswell. I mean, there's always been this thing where somebody sees a shape in the clouds, or they see something flying through the air, and they automatically assume that it's extraterrestrial in origin. Why do we make that jump, do you think?
Well, I think, some people make the jump, some people don't, right? I mean, there's individual differences there, I think that, I cover this in my book. You go out looking for something, you might just see it, right?
Sure.
That old saying, and so that's why I opened the book that way. I don't know. I think if you have these sort of pre-beliefs about things, then you're more likely to, correspondence bias. You're more likely to make a connection to something like, oh, that must be what it is. I think there's a lot of people are very skeptical too, and the way I approach it is as a skeptic always. I'm data oriented. I want to look at the data. I try to look at things in the big picture of things, and that's really where where we're going with this conversation. It's sort of the big picture, and that's where I'd like to go with it. Is what's really going on here with all of these events, all converging and happening. Is it a big distraction? Is it really just cover up stuff? I really have wondered about all this UAP stuff. With the official DoD report. Is it really just a cover up of just two things? One, our own evolving technology, and we're in the era of drones, and hypersonic weapons and drones. And is this really just sort of a cover for that development and of our adversaries, and that they're just not being forthright? Maybe the recent balloon thing is a great example of this. Maybe those other observations were our adversaries. Maybe they were just Chinese drones. Maybe they're launching it off of a submarine. A number of nations have submarines, and maybe they're launching off a sub. Maybe they're dropping it down from a high altitude from outer space or something. It's not impossible they could drop something out of a satellite.
Yeah.
It's also possible that they're using hypersonic weapons just to transport things. And more recently, I saw an article about it, or video. It was a underwater drone that would travel underwater and then come out and fly. It's Chinese, and then would fly. So think about that as a weapon, right? You come into a harbor, you launch it off a sub, or you drop it off something, and then you have it sit under the water for whatever, a month, and then you launch it, and it flies over the city and lights off an EMP, something like that. I don't think you would need to. You could just do that with a hypersonic weapon.
Yeah.
But
Well, and the other thing is, you have something like that. You've got a drone that can run underwater. You can send it to one place, and it becomes the decoy, and it can blast out whatever kind of noise it needs to make, or it makes an attack run on its own. And let's say if you're coming from a submarine, you can be, 20 miles off, 50 miles off, however much your distance is, and do a two-pronged attack that way. I think it's a legitimate concern. We had, what was it, how long ago was this now? Red Bull sponsored the super high altitude skydive. You remember when they did that? When they
yes,
jumped off the whatever it was? And I'm thinking, hey, as little respect as I have for people like Brianna Wu, you could drop rocks from space and take that very basic concept, and here's the satellite, and we develop the technology that all it's got to do is just basically act like an old-fashioned cannon, and we have a cannonball shooting down at us, and let's load it with anthrax, let's load it with nuclear fissionables.
Stop giving them ideas.
I mean, I'm sure that I'm sure somebody's already had all these ideas. And you mentioned launch platforms. Who's to say that those balloons couldn't be a launch platform for a little drone that gets spotted later? This Chinese balloon had plenty of time to fly over the country. Maybe it let something go and it's someplace else, and that's one of the other ones that we saw.
well, my biggest concern was electromagnetic pulse, and just my instinct, and quite frankly, I don't want to, as you said, RJ, not to give ideas away, right? But believe me, I'm not giving anything away. I mean, that's how you take down our country. It's just one or two EMPs, and boom, we're done. And my first thought when I saw the thing about the first balloon was that who's to say it didn't have just a device on it that was an EMP? They fly over Omaha. I used to be stationed at Omaha, by the way, and I quite frankly, I'll admit it, I got very angry about the whole thing. Having this balloon, surveillance balloon, doing signals intelligence stuff, gathering signals, as I'm assuming, and probably doing some other stuff, surveillance stuff, right over our nuclear facilities in Montana, and coming across down into the south of Omaha, where U.S. Strategic Command is, and then flying out over Missouri and so forth. I think it flew over Missouri. I know it went south of, it went north of part of Kansas, I think.
Yeah, I think it got closer to St. Louis than it did Kansas City, but I'm not sure. I can't be certain about that.
And it's not like this is the 70s where they're like, okay, well, when it gets to the coast, closer to us, we'll shoot it down and get what it was. It's not taking film that had to be delivered somewhere. This, the new millennium. We are probably live streaming all the data that it's collecting as it goes all the way across the country. I'm with you getting angry here. We can't shoot down this thing that's flying over the place where we keep things to shoot down, like this thing.
Right.
Yeah, right. I gotta be careful what I say. To me, I'll just say it's asinine, and I'm not buying it. They could have shot it down over the Pacific Ocean because they knew it had launched, and they could have knocked it out somewhere over Montana, somewhere, or Alaska. Come on, or Canada. It's just odd to me. But again, back to the EMP thing. That was my first concern. Of course, if they were going to start World War III with an EMP, they don't need a balloon to do it. I mean, they just put it on a hypersonic weapon, or they could do it with a missile, obviously. But really, this hypersonic weapon thing, I don't know if you know much about this, but
I heard about it when it first made the news here, a year and a half ago, and we got basically caught with our britches down. And what do you mean they launched this? Hey, it goes how fast? And then we find out that we're working on our own, but it's not as far along development. It just it seems like the Chinese are skipping ahead a few steps ahead of where we are. which
Yes,
is
they also
scary.
have an aircraft. I understand. I haven't read too much about it. I'm very interested in the topic. I'm really into aerospace. Like I'm gonna research how it's nuclear powered. But apparently there is a aircraft that they can fly almost indefinitely, just fly it up in high atmosphere. It reminds me of that sci-fi film, one of the most famous ones of all, with the giant the robot that comes out. The thing is like flying over the country, just orbiting the Earth, and eventually it lands in Washington D.C.
Oh yeah, the day the Earth stood still.
Yeah, they're still right, and it's like they actually have an aircraft that can do that can fly for days. I'm assuming much longer than that, and without maintenance, and then it could drop at any time and take us out. The thing about these hypersonic weapons is that unlike a missile, like a missiles, they have trajectories. And two issues with missiles, I don't believe there's any way you can't recall it like a bomber. Like you can't say, okay, call it off. We're not going to destroy the world.
Yeah.
You can't call it off once it's launched, unless they have someone they can disconnect the warheads. I don't know, but bombers you can call off. But hypersonic weapons are interesting because they can have a particular trajectory. Like it could be flying over like it's heading towards New York City, but then divert and hit Atlanta or something, And so they're much faster, and they don't have to fly. They don't have to go way up out into space and come down. And they can launch them off of aircraft. The Russians, in fact, have them. I believe they can launch off of their bombers.
Well, there's our distraction. China's got all these super fast weapons, and they're tossing balloons out. Say, let them think we're further behind than we are.
Yeah. Well, and you talk about the different reports that were coming out. I mean, our second show here, we talked with Stephen Bassett from Paradigm Research, and he's really been pushing for the government to disclose all sorts of things, not just the pieces that we've gotten. But I guess the question still remains, if these things aren't man-made, what else could they be? Because I've seen demons, I've seen UFOs, I've seen angels. I mean, depending on what kind of motivations you want to assign to them, and
or which alien race it is.
Which alien race it is? Are they friendly? Are they not friendly? Are we in this idea of why haven't they contacted us yet? All these different things. Now, personally, I am in the camp. I don't believe that there is other life outside of Earth. That is mostly informed by my faith, but also the fact that we have been sending out signals and messages and probes for how many decades now, and if there was a race more advanced or as advanced, if the development was relatively parallel to our own, then we should be getting some kind of a signal back from someplace, allowing for the time dilation. When we should be hearing something from somebody somewhere, and we're not. There are these little glitches and glimpses, and people think that there's a pattern to it, and maybe this is a signal, and it never turns out to be anything. So what else could these things be? My thinking is that they're manufactured by the various different governments, and nobody wants to talk about they're manufactured by the various different governments.
Yeah, so if we apply Occam's razor to this issue, right, I would go with that. I would say that the simplest explanation here is probably that they're just advanced technologies and a combination of our own and foreign adversary weapon systems, technologies, and that throughout history we've always, and rightfully so. I think for the most part that if you have for national defense, you're going to have a strategy of, if you're developing a new technology or an advanced technology, you're going to keep it secret because you don't want the adversaries stealing it or sabotaging it, whatever. So, and I'm for that if it's for the common defense and it's constitutional. But I don't know. As we were saying earlier, that with everything that's kind of coming together right now and things, I think there's maybe the blinders are coming off, and that there's a lot of things are happening here. We've got, and I'm trying not to be political, but this very topic with the balloon things recently, and it's undoubtedly a political issue, not just a science, entertainment thing by any means. It's very political,
Right.
and I think that we're either being, completely BS'd, and are we being BS'd because for good reasons that are in the best interest of people, or is it something else?
Yeah.
And those are the kinds of
I don't think
questions we should all be asking.
I don't think we're playing the backup roles in the Architects of Fear with Robert Culp at the lead here. I just don't think that there's that beneficial of a mindset in the government. But to veer off just a little bit, the thing that feeds a lot of conspiracy is that humans are very much a post hoc ergo propter hoc logic machine. We see something happen, and then we see another thing happen in close proximity. We're like, oh, that caused that. And we saw this happen within the past couple of weeks with the tragedy in Turkey, where you had this very red Georgia O'Keeffe shaped cloud formation that was like nothing anybody had ever seen before, and then followed by an earthquake.
Right.
And what came to my mind was Jules Verne's Master of the World, where, he had this dirigible that was carrying this electronic weapon, but was always, kind of masked in a cloud.
Well, and a lot of that speculation now, with the existence of what is it, HARP in Alaska, yes, with this high altitude energy thing, what was a flight of fancy 15, 20, 30, 50, 100 years ago, just a thing in science fiction, is now a thing. And whether it's, controlling the weather, how many science fiction stories have we read or seen TV or movies where they control the weather, right? And it's and HARP, for a lot of people, is that kind of capability. We can make this stuff happen. We can create earthquakes. We can make storms, and whether we can or not, that's in the discussion now. That's in the conversation, not just here in the U.S. I've seen speculation from other places after the big earthquake in Turkey as well. HARP did this.
Yeah, my other novel, Behind the Machine, is about this. It's about using AI to control the weather. And so in the novel, I ask, well, why are they controlling it? And they're keeping it secret. Or is the plot of the whole novel. And what was interesting is, again, this is good correspondence bias, right? When you see multiple things and you make the connection because you're thinking about it. And I swear to you, just I think it was yesterday, the day before, on social media, I saw several independent people. They don't know each other. They were posting photos. When it was actually on the news in New Hampshire, mm-hmm, about the pillars of light. And it's like these lights that were kind of coming down at night. And there was someone else who had, and actually I saw at least 3 other people post stuff, different parts of the world, seeing anomalies in the sky and related to sort of like these light. And then I was looking, oh gosh, was there a solar flare? And it was there. And actually, I think there was one in the last month, actually. Is this just something caused by the sun, causing some stuff? I don't know. But boy, I was saying about this very topic just the other day, and I didn't know about this thing over in Turkey. That's interesting.
Well, how much, there's a channel, there's a channel on YouTube, Suspicious Observers. And a lot of what they do, it has to do with sun activity and mm-hmm, solar flares and magnetic storms and that kind of thing. But what was it? How many weeks ago there was the giant piece of the sun breaking off from the sun and creating this
now it has a heartbeat
thing? How much could that come into something like this? I mean, JR mentions in the chat, before the Air Force, you had sailors reporting unexplained phenomena for thousands of years. You got St. Elmo's fire is a phenomenon that a lot of people have observed, but a lot of that's just kind of like ball lightning, right? There's not some nefarious clandestine organization working to light everything up with electricity. And yet, at the same time, even the simple answers get looked at kind of sideways. That's really convenient answer that you got there. I don't believe you.
Yeah, I want to come back to something you had mentioned quickly there, Jason, just a few minutes ago. It's this idea of the spiritual aspects of all this too.
Yeah.
And when you get into that realm, it's like, okay, now are we talking about science anymore? We're just talking about just beliefs and all that. But it's another just area that I've been thinking a lot about too in the last few years, and how that plays into this. And it does seem that there is this kind of, I guess, as I keep saying, convergence of things. Convergence of technology with AI, a convergence of this you get into the transhuman stuff with modifications to the human body and so forth. And some of the other things with all the deception going on and the attacks on religion. And it just certainly feels like there's something going on in society that's more than just technology advancement in itself.
Signs in the heavens.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny, you look at how people are, the very nature of people, and you being a psychologist, you've probably run into this more than I have. But this is something that we've talked about on a number of programs, the fact that we are made to need a belief. We're made to believe in something, whether that's God or Allah or Buddha or ourselves or trust the science or this, that, the other. We're made to believe in something. And when that something is taken away, you have a void. You have a gap there now. Well, I need to believe in something. And I have to wonder from the spiritual side of things how much this need to believe in UFOs, this need to believe in aliens and extraterrestrials and visitors from outside our planet, how much of that belief is based on the need to believe in something because I don't or I can't believe in God, I don't have a religion, I don't have a faith, I'll believe in this.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. There's been a lot of people talking about that in the last year or so. We've seen it where when people become less religious and believing in, say, a higher power, traditional, really like Christianity, that they'll turn to something else, like Marxism,
Yeah.
communism, and it fills this sort of gap, and they put all their confidence in that and in these ideas that we quite frankly know will fail, because just look at history.
Right.
I think so. I think that people do have a tendency to do that because of a sort of innate need that's sort of wired into us. You also see it in science fiction, right? In science fiction novels and movies, where they're often they have some entity, right? There's a lot of Star Trek episodes where they're out there and then they encounter some entity that's godlike, right? It thinks it's God. You get that all the time. You get that throughout sci-fi, and I think it's because we subconsciously we realize that.
So how do you steer the conversation of something like that, where you've got people that on the one side you've got people who are skeptics. These UFOs are man-made. There's an easy explanation for this. We may not be getting it, but there's something out there. We'll find out. And then you have the people who believe in the metaphysical side of things, angels, demons, principalities, whatnot. And then you've got the people who think that maybe they're aliens, extraterrestrials. How do you steer the conversation with those selected groups so that it's a productive conversation, that maybe we do get closer to figuring out what these things are and what purpose they serve.
I was thinking this about this very topic, that let's say it does come out that they actually are, or at least some of these UAPs, or the government says they've confirmed, that we've made contact. It's in my novel. I kind of play through this. And let's say that they do, but will the people believe them? Like, and what will it take for you to believe that they're telling us the truth? And, for example, there's the Chinese, for example, have this technology where they can project like a city in the clouds using, I guess it's just lasers, but you can, make these images, apparitions. Has been, going back to Star Trek stuff or science fiction, where it's really the Wizard of the Oz thing, where it's someone who's really small and nothing, who's controlling something that seems way more powerful, so that to give themselves power. Might there be beliefs like that it's not real? What would it take for it to be real?
Yeah,
something like the Bradbury story. I think it was Bradbury, the Toynbee convector.
Yeah, and so how will people even trust that it's real or not? I think you'll have factions. You'll have some people that will just blindly believe it. Some people will panic. Some people will, I don't know, militarize.
Well, and you talk about who's going to believe the skeptics. Gallup and Knight Foundation both just released a survey not too long ago about whether you can trust the media, and there's not that many percentage-wise that believe the media is trustworthy. It's the lowest that it's ever been in terms of statistics. And you have the media there, and you have politicians there. Nobody's trusting these people to get anything right, to tell us anything.
That's if you trust the polls.
That's true. If you trust the polls, and some of them have better track records than others. But even if the media is spinning this to be better than it actually is, that's still, 25% of the population thinks that the media is not deliberately trying to mislead us. That's not a very good number. When that's your profession and that's what you do all the time, and you rely on that to feed your family or grow your business or whatever, when nobody trusts you, how do you convince people, yes, we actually are telling the truth this time?
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. And I think it's a major problem. And I don't know if the current administration said, or any administration said, today has been confirmed, we have there is an object that's entered into our orbits, and or it's confirmed they're definitely here. They're not ours or any other terrestrial source. Would I believe it or not? I don't know. I think you'd have to have preponderance of the evidence. That there have to be enough information, enough independent sources. If they just said it, I don't think I'd believe it.
Well, you go back to the Marfa lights, for example, out in West Texas. So many people have seen those things. There's videotape. There's documentation. There's something there. And yet, after all this time, we still don't have any kind of a credible hypothesis, theory, explanation, anything on what those things actually are. Because they don't behave in an expected way when it comes to aircraft or drones or balloons or whatever else. Lightning. Lightning doesn't necessarily travel in a ball in a straight line, and it certainly doesn't vary its speed. So you have these phenomena that still are out there that nobody can explain at all about any of it. So any attempt at an explanation is probably going to come off seeming a little glib. I would think. Well, yeah, it's a thing. It's a it's a weather balloon. It's a prototype piece of technology that we've been testing out at White Sands. You don't think anything of it. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Well, I was just saying, like, is it the absence of evidence doesn't make it true either, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, like with the Marfa lights, I always thought that had to do with just like the mirage. And there is some light source way off, and it's reflecting off of the heat of the desert or whatever, and it's creating this like looks like the light is floating. There's been other places where they've observed things like that. But what is the source of those lights? Well, I don't know. Can you rule out that it's not a hoaxer doing it? My novel has this whole sequence that's about this idea of hoaxing.
Yeah.
Like, can you rule that out? And then what happens when you do catch a hoaxer? Does it discredit every other sighting, or not? And those kinds of issues. I don't know. I think. My instincts right now, as I said before, is that I like to leave things open, possibilities, but I'm very skeptical. I like to apply a very logical, scientific approach to understanding phenomena, and part of that is just looking at all the evidence that you can and trying to make sense of it. And then if you can't rule out everything, is there really a preponderance of evidence suggesting something? And we have a real trust problem. Getting back to your points about the media and the press, and it is the worst it's ever been in my lifetime. And I don't trust anything coming out of mainstream media, hardly anything. I mean, even like a weather report coming out of them now, do I trust that now? I don't know. It's just gotten so bad, and in an obvious way. They're just completely, not completely, but a high degree of being just discredited.
Yeah.
And on a variety of topics that impact us all.
Is there, I would think if there was one thing that would drive the government to acknowledge that these are real, if they're real, it's the fact that things have changed since the 1950s. We're always walking around with a video camera now. So everybody, and you not only get one person saying, "Hey, I see this thing," you get multiple angles from around the same city saying, "Hey, what are these lights going across the bridge here?" And you see them from different perspectives. So there's no longer this, well, that guy was drinking Drano and now he's seeing angels. They've got to come up with a better explanation, because there's too many people reporting things.
Yeah, that's always when you have multiple people seeing the same thing, and it's more than just their word of mouth. They have some evidence, and it's been very interesting though. In the last year, in the last couple months, actually, there's been some very interesting sightings off of the West Coast, off of San Diego, which is where where Commander Fravor had and his wing person and co-pilot had witnessed the Tic Tac UFO. There's been some sightings out there by commercial pilots and multiple, and even like they'll call into like LA Center, which is the airport, and like, are you seeing these things? And they'll file a report, and there's multiple people seeing the same lights. And this is really interesting. One of the things, as I was saying early on, is that there are these patterns now, some observation of these objects, anomalous objects or sources of light, and they're seeing that they call it the racetrack UFOs, where it looks like they're doing a circle,
right?
And they kind of disappear and they come back, like they're doing some kind of circle. And what really got me very interested in this was that they were saying they very often appear to be over by the Big Dipper, kind of towards the North Star, like they're kind of in that zone, which is very interesting to me, which is north. So maybe it's just that they're seeing things to the north. But I found that to be very interesting, and they seem to be in the same spot and in different locations. And so, and they look at the data too that they have on the objects, like they can estimate the altitude and so forth. And it's really interesting what they're observing there. And is it extraterrestrial? No, I don't know, but could it be our military doing some stuff with drones, or the Navy doing something with drones?
No.
Maybe so.
Hang on, David. You're not going to get off the hot seat that easy. Do you think? What's your actual thought about that?
Given again multiple sources of data, that I believe the pilots in what they have seen. There's video too. There's smartphone video,
Right.
and the pilots can just take a photo of it. Unfortunately, there are smartphones that do a horrible job at focusing at white or light spots of
Oh,
light in the sky.
Right.
Tell me about it. I'm sitting here trying to take a picture of the supermoon a few years ago, and it's like it's this big thing in the sky. I go click, and I can barely. It's smaller than a street lamp.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it just doesn't do it very well. But that's got me stumped. It's an example of very recent sightings that are very difficult to explain. But again, Occam's razor. Is it really extraterrestrial, or is it really just technology? Again, Navy testing stuff with drones. Maybe they're doing stuff at super high altitude. I forgot what the pilot's name, but it was a commercial flight. And I believe he was a veteran too, had been a military pilot. And this object, it actually turned. They hit it with radar, I guess, and it turned, and it like shined light on their aircraft, and then it flew by them, and it was gone.
Yeah.
So it was something that appeared to be, acting with some intelligence, like it was reacting to their radar.
But you're gonna throw light beams at me. I'm gonna throw light beams at you.
Yeah, like it was just kind of washing it with light and then took off. But
is there a possibility that this is, assuming that they're real, is there a possibility that this is maybe supernatural and not extraterrestrial?
I don't know if is it any more likely to be supernatural in the sense of something crossing dimensional barriers, and I don't know.
Now you're going into a whole other realm, because
that's true.
It's one thing to say there's no life in this universe other than us, but then when you say, but there are other universes, and start stacking those dimensions,
well,
that's interesting talk.
The thing that strikes me is that we've gone an hour now, and I have neglected to mention Hangar 18. I mean, this is stuff that's phenomenon in our movies. You talk about, David, your book, and it's not the only one out there that talks about possible visitations or UFO sightings or whatnot. You also have, you've got a whole slew of books about first contact, supernatural beings coming to visit, extraterrestrial beings coming to visit, and all that, and the government covering everything up. Hangar 18, Roswell, Stargate, all these different shows that talk about this kind of thing. Does that entertainment product skew the belief system one way or the other, do you think? Do you think we're more primed now to believe in UFOs because we've had 100 some odd years of science fiction?
More prone. Yeah, I think, as back we were talking about before, but just being primed to things. So if you've been exposed to something before, then you're going to be looking for it, or more likely to see it. I think that's absolutely true, as the data shows. This to me is a highly relevant question here. And because we can talk about conspiracies, cover-ups, what really was at Roswell. To me, that's pretty much exhausted and closed. I don't really have a whole lot of interest in Roswell, because I've actually been to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I'm where Hangar 18 is. I don't know if maybe they picked up a weather balloon or something else, whatever, and they took it there, and it gets spun up to a story. I don't want to discredit the witnesses and the military personnel or anything like that, historically or currently, but I keep thinking about this. Let's just say that they know that there actually is something visiting us, that they've pretty much they have confirmed it's not terrestrial at all. It's not the Chinese, not the Russians or anyone else, and it's not ours, and they know it, and that they've confirmed that it is coming from somewhere else. Would those in power want to keep that to themselves and not let that out? A lot of people have hypothesized about that. It's not a unique idea by any means, and some have equated it to, well, it's about energy and you know, 0 point energy and all this stuff, which is in my book as well. And if they know about this like infinite resource of energy, it means power, and they would keep it to themselves. You know, it's like the Stargate. You know, if you can do something that you can use for military things or whatever, why would you want everyone else to know about, or your adversaries on this planet?
See, that
I don't know.
presupposes the idea that the government is actually more powerful than whatever it is that's visiting us, to be able to keep them from saying, you know what, we're just going to do a broadcast all over the country right now. You know, it's like, it would be like, you know, our government trying to convince us that China never existed. You know, and China just rises up and says, hi, we're here.
Right.
Yeah, hey, that's an interesting hypothesis or possibility, and make a great part of a novel.
Well,
Right,
you know,
right.
then we see a lot of the ones where the government hides everything. One of my favorite science fiction television shows, Jason, you'll remember this, was Alien Nation, where
Yes.
it was the opposite of hidden, is like integrated into society over 5 years period. And you know, they're among us and living next door and everything.
Do you think we'll ever get a straight answer?
I do. I think we'll know. It'll be more clear. So this UAP stuff, I think it may be resolved, and that there'll be some acknowledgement. Let's face it, right? If it really is just drone technology that they're just trying to kind of keep secret, or that our own government is just they're witnessing other countries' drones and they just don't know what to make of them, then eventually that'll come out because the technology will be just more observable.
Yeah.
But you know, technology is always much more advanced than it appears to be, because they keep it kind of secret, and then all of a sudden it's there, you know. And so it's just behind the scenes being developed. And so I think a lot of what people are seeing is drone technology. I do.
Well, the Pentagon's quoted, and I'm not quoting this exactly, but I'm thinking I'm getting most of the words right. They're quoted as saying that we are in possession of vehicles that were not manufactured on Earth. Now, whether that means they were manufactured on the International Space Station or on the moon, is, you know, it's how do you categorize it? But that would seem to me to be a pretty tacit admission of using a lot of words to say we have a flying saucer.
Yeah.
Maybe is it just people who are former government employees saying that, or is it just, hey, you find a meteorite and, well, hey, now I've got something extraterrestrial in my pocket, you know, like,
yeah,
you know, I don't know. That's interesting though, these exotic materials that they don't occur on Earth, but someone has possession of them. That's quite interesting.
How do we know? How do we know that those rare materials are not available on Earth somewhere? I mean, is this new metal rare? This new element so rare that nobody's heard about it, or is it rare because somebody made it up in a lab somewhere? And hey, we've got a new element. Here's our unobtainium.
Yeah, I think it's not impossible. I mean, like I said, you find a meteor somewhere that's been buried so far, no one's, you know, discovered it. I've kind of thought about this idea of like something gets uncovered as the ice melts, you know, and they uncover, like, let's say they uncover this giant mound of gold, you know, that would just basically wipe out, you know, the rarity of precious metal, gold, you know, for example, or something else. But I think we probably would have discovered that already if it's there. They're keeping it pretty well secret.
It'll be shaped like Atlantis. It's on the other side of the ice wall, right on the edges of the flat Earth. It's just
right, exactly. But I don't know. I think it's possible there could be, again, just from meteors that are here, or there's, you know, there could be an ancient meteor. So that's my point. That it could be under the ice. Or under the crust that's down several hundred feet or miles down or something, you know, that just hasn't been uncovered. I don't know if they've done a full Earth scan yet. I mean, you can scan the Earth obviously for stuff underneath. I don't know if they've done every inch of the Earth.
I don't know if they've done. I'd have to look that up. I don't know if they've done that or not.
Yeah, you can do it with partly, at least, with satellites, and then of course on the ground. Incidentally, that was also been the news recently about the Chinese flying over Hawaii with lasers from a satellite. That was a very interesting thing in the news too. why were they doing that?
No. Well, I think that's the question that we end on, because we don't get an answer tonight, as much as we would like to figure all this stuff out. I don't know. RJ, what do you have? Last thoughts?
I want to believe. I think there's an awful lot of space out there, but just if they're at least as intelligent as us, then I don't think they're going to send biological citizens in ships. They'll do like what we would do. We would send robots. We sent robots to Mars. We'd send them further out. We'll find their machines before we meet them.
Oh yeah, no question.
I agree. They would just send an AI, robot, as you said, or something else.
And what would be really interesting to me, I wrote a short story about this that didn't go anywhere, but it would be interesting to me if we received something very low tech that would like boggle our minds as like, this is not from a high tech society. This couldn't possibly be aliens. This is stuff we had 40 years ago. And of course, I'm thinking of the vinyl LP that we sent in Voyager out into the nether regions of space. And somebody says, no, anybody who's like highly intelligent enough to send spaceships out wouldn't be sending LPs with grooves in it. We'd be sending laser discs or encoded messages on computer tape or something.
Right. Or they actually went with beta, and they're using beta instead of VHS.
Yeah. We wouldn't be able to play it. That would suck.
Right.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. I don't. It just seems to me that on the one hand, there's something there, and there's something that the government or the media don't want us talking about, or they don't want us to know something. They don't want us to understand something. That's on the one side. Does it present a threat? That's a question that's adjunct to that. Where if they're real, what kind of threat assessment can we do on these things? If they're they're not standing still long enough for even to figure out what it is that they are, how are we going to formulate a plan against it? And I know the rumors are that they've got, they game all sorts of scenarios with the Joint Chiefs of the Pentagon. They come up with all of these different possibilities. They've even got a zombie outbreak scenario. Here's the protocol if this happens, and if we have zombies, our U.S. military has a plan. So you've got that part. On the other hand, it's all silly, and it's not something that we spend too much time on, because we're never going to get an answer to it, and half of it's not real anyway. It fuels the imagination. It sparks that interest and whatnot, and especially with science fiction. But at the end of the day, it's a distraction. It's something that keeps us from looking someplace else, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's in many ways it's obvious that it is, as these things have a news cycle, and okay, the attention's on this, but I don't know. I also think that this is what scares me the most, is that getting back to the idea of like the government or others in power knowing something that they're trying to keep from everyone else. And yeah. I do think about that here. Is like, what do they really know, and what are they really doing? And then again, the issue of other things all coming together, like the AI stuff and the super advances in AI and how it's just a game changer. And what else about that may be known by the elite in the world, and right. They want to shape the world into a way that's going to serve their ends and will keep things from the public towards those ends. And I also think that a lot of this is just financial. It's about money and power. And right. Where I'm a military vet, and if I was younger, I probably would have loved to have been in the Space Force. But I asked myself, okay, it's kind of cool and all, but why? Why another whole branch of the military? And it's like the Air Force already has Space Command,
right?
Yep. And it's like, is it really just about where's the money going?
That's a very interesting thought. Of course, that question can be asked of a lot of different programs of the United States government.
Right.
Yes.
So,
Why do we have this program when we already have these other 5 programs?
yeah. Why are you
Because
passing
nobody
that
says.
law that nobody's going to follow because they're already breaking the law? Yeah, anyway. All right. We will wrap with that. RJ, where do you have anything else that you want to talk about here, bring up? My mind is starting to
No,
drift a little bit.
I've got things to bring up, in the after show, but
Okay.
nothing that is appropriate for this show. So
Okay. All right, David, where can people find you? We've had the website up a little bit, davidluxton.com. And this link is in the notes. You can also find him over on Twitter at David D. Luxton. And what are you working on right now?
Well, I'm doing a number of academic things, mostly in the realm of AI stuff, but I've been working on kind of sketching out a part 2 to the Goldilocks zone, which I really feel like I just compelled to write. I don't know who reads fiction anymore. I mean, it's like it's being an independent writer and stuff. It's like, what's it going to take to get people to read it, But my first book on this topic about the Goldilocks zone, about UFO stuff and the psychological aspect of all this, to me, it's like it's so relevant to our times. And I think in part 2, I really want to, where does this go, to address some of the questions that we've talked about tonight.
Yeah.
Like where might this go, and to try to come to some kind of resolution.
All right, David. Well, thanks very much for spending the time with us tonight. We've gone over our usual hour. That's when you've got a good show.
Yes.
Where it's when it's engaged, and we just keep going, and we probably keep going. So we'll have to do this like a part 2 or something again. Or we'll cross over into various different other stuff, because you've been on Live from the Bunker, now you've been on Blast from the Bunker. We'll just keep going back and forth like that. It'll be our own little Crisis on Infinite Earths.
We're not short on crises, that's for sure.
and no, Mrs. Boss, we're not doing a 5-hour stream. I draw the line. I draw the line. So anyway, all right, David, thanks very much for being here tonight, sir.
You bet, my pleasure.
it could all shatter on poly sci-fi for me. Just saying.
Sounds good.
Yeah. All right. So down here below us, you can see all of the different social media places where you can find us. RJ, where can people find Critical Blast?
We are criticalblast.com. Our podcast is youtube.com/@criticalblast, Twitter @criticalblast, Facebook @criticalblast, Instagram @criticalblast. There's a pattern here, folks. If you can deduce it, you can find us just about anywhere.
Yeah. All right. And for us, you can find us on a lot of different social medias, all the different social medias. We've also got a Discord server and a Subscribestar account if you want to support us that way. And, of course, various different shows that we have here. We do invite you to subscribe to the channel. And feel free to share. We will have more of these conversations, I'm sure, with David and others here on this particular program, Blast from the Bunker, which we're going to try to do at least one a month. We'll see how that goes. We may do more as the topics unfold and unwind and ensnare us.
You know that I have my passes for the upcoming Ozark Mountain UFO conference in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. So we'll be reporting live from there.
Cool. That'll be fun.
Happy to,
now,
when is come on and do that?
When is that happening?
It is. Give me just a minute here, and I'll let you know.
Okay. By the way,
because it's coming up soon now.
Yeah. By the way, while RJ is looking that up, it will that presents me with an opportunity to mention our master conventions list over at sci-fi4me.com. We're 2,400 plus active Comic-Cons, comic book conventions, cosplay conventions, horror conventions, that sort of thing. So you can check us out over there. Make sure yours is on the list if you have an event. So when is this happening?
This is happening April 14th through the 16th of this year. And if you want to know more about it, it is at ozarkufoconference.com.
All right. Okay. Now, I also neglected to mention today during Live from the Bunker, that we have a project that just started over on Kickstarter. It's not our project. Bonsart Bokal, the Association of Ishtar, launching Bound for the Sticks. That started today. It's a steampunk comic book, and we're going to have Bonsart on Good Morning Multiverse this coming Saturday to talk about the project. So a little
Excellent.
promotion that forward. Of course, we've got Open Line Friday.
We're shipping that.
Open Line Friday on Friday, so join us for that. So, David, thanks very much for being here. I know I've said that a couple of times now, so this time I mean it. We're done, and we're on our way out the door. Thanks very much for being here, folks.
Thank you.